Can you imagine this game plan for this little bird's survival? Dig a hole, bury the eggs, cover them back up, abandon them eventually, and hope that they survive. Not a super good game plan to ensure the survival of your species. Yet for this bird, that's exactly what it does. Let's take a look. You've probably never heard of a bird called a megapode before. Maybe you've heard of this bird. It also has the name the Australian incubator bird. Maybe you've heard of that. But it seems like very few are really familiar with this bird and just how amazing that it is. When we take a look at what is occurring with this bird, it starts by the males building a nest. They will build this nest and wait for a female to come and inspect the nest. The female will inspect the nest, and if it's to her liking, then she will lay eggs. And then she will abandon them, and she will leave. And whereas most birds will sit on their nests, or make the nest and sit on their eggs and keep their eggs all nice and toasty warm and really care for them, not the megapode. So the female lays the eggs, and then it's up to the male to ensure their survival. And so he will attempt to keep them alive for the next 49 to 90 days. In order to keep them alive, he has to keep them just the right temperature and just the right humidity. And so what he will do is in his nest that is full of all kinds of various elements that he has gathered, he will begin burying these eggs with sand and debris and all kinds of things like that. He will actually have a bottom layer of compost because compost produces some warmth. And then he will make sure that they stay within a temperature range of 91 degrees to 100 degrees. And it has to stay within these parameters, otherwise the eggs will die. Some studies have even found that if the eggs were kept right at a 91 degree mark, that the survival rate of the little birds were only 45.8%. So even at 91 degrees, you have roughly a 50-50 chance, less than that, for these birds to survive. So not only does he have to keep them closer to that 100 mark, but he has to keep the humidity level at about 80% or higher. Of all of the studies that have taken a look at this, all of them designate that high humidity levels are essential, and 80% was the lowest that I was even able to find where the megapodes were able to survive. So it has to be above 80%. And so what the male megapode will do is he will stick his beak down into the debris, somehow be able to know the temperature and humidity levels of his nest, and then if it's too hot, he'll scrape some of the debris away. If it's too cold, he'll add some on top of it, all to ensure that these eggs are kept at the right temperature. And if the temperature levels and the humidity levels are varying a lot and he's having trouble keeping them where they need to be, then that may contribute to them having to incubate for a longer time down in the ground in all of these deep nests. And so again, they can last up to 90 days incubating in their eggs, hoping for the right temperature and humidity to ensure their survival. All of it's dependent on Dad for this first part. What's really amazing is that there are some of these megapodes that, depending on the coolness of the weather, will build mounds up to 15 feet high. Some of them are only about 3 feet, but again, up to 15 feet in some cases. Once the male megapode has determined that it's about time to hatch, which again, when you have a range of 49 to 90 days, I'm not sure how you would know that it's time to hatch or not, but when he senses that it's time to hatch, he abandons them too. And so now what we have is a bunch of eggs that are buried underground, and it's like, well, good luck. hope you survive, the baby megapodes will never see their parents. They are buried underground, left to themselves in hopes that they're going to survive. And as you might imagine, this poses quite a few problems for these baby birds. The first problem is the fact that they have to incubate for so long. This means that on the longest end, the megapode has the capability of having one of the longest, if not the longest, incubation time of all birds. If they reach that 90-day mark, it's now become the longest incubation time of all birds. Well, the problem is, how are they able to survive inside of an egg for that long? See, being inside of the egg is actually really problematic because it needs sustenance and it has to be able to get rid of its own waste. And it eventually is going to need air and all of these types of things. It has to be combined within the egg in just the right parameters for it to survive. So for example, chickens have an incubation time of roughly about 20 days in that 20-day mark. And if they go much past that, then there's a good chance that that baby chick is dead. Well, for them, they just happen to have one of the largest yolks of all birds, so that they're able to receive all the sustenance that they need for that long incubation time, and they don't have a problem at all. They have large yolks to combat this problem. The second problem is how they're able to get out of the shell to begin with. See, again, comparing them to chickens and a lot of birds, they have what's called an egg tooth. And what this is it's a kind of a tooth or a barb on the end of the beak, in which they're able to kind of poke a hole through the egg shell from the inside and be able to get, outside air and everything like that. Well, megapodes don't have an egg tooth. And so how are they going to break out of their own shell? Well, they just so happen to have some very powerful feet, and they have claws that they have developed inside of the egg as well. And so what they'll do is they will use their powerful legs and their feet with the claws to break out of the shell and be able to escape. However, that can also pose a problem, because if you're surrounded by your brothers and sisters in their eggs as well, when you start using powerful feet and claws, then you can start damaging all of your other brothers and sisters, damaging yourself by maybe scraping itself or catching it in its face, or who knows, where those flailing feet might end up. And well, on the ends or encompassing its claws are these little jelly-like caps that allow it to be use its powerful feet, but also have kind of like gloves on these claws that will keep it from damaging itself or its brothers and sisters. And then those will fall off later on, no problem at all. But this brings up problem number 3. Okay, so you've been able to last in your egg because you have this enormous yolk. You've been able to break out of your egg because you have large, powerful feet. But you're underground. Now you find out that, you're buried 15 feet underground, and you're not a smart human to be able to rationalize through things. You are a bird, and you're buried 15 feet underground. How are you going to work out your way out of this one? Well, they just so happen to know that they're underground. And in some cases, they will, it'll take about 2 days for them to dig out from this. And so for some unknown reason, they know how to escape. They know that they're underground. They know which direction to dig and how to get out and how to go about that entire thing. Somehow they still have enough oxygen, and they're able to, even over a 2-day period, survive without food and water and everything like that, and they'll continue to use their powerful feet to kind of dig and wiggle their way up to the surface. And so these baby incubator birds are perfectly designed and equipped to survive their underground tombs. And this brings us to our last problem, which is the fact that the baby megapodes have been completely abandoned underground, as we've just talked about. But the parents are never going to see their young. The babies are never going to see their parents. They're never going to be taught by their parents. They're never going to be rescued by their parents. They're totally left to survive on their own. So not only are they left on their own underground 15 feet, up to 15 feet for 2 days, but when they get to the surface, there are no parents to teach them how to fly. There's no parents to show them how to forage for food or anything like that. They are completely left to their own survival. And yet, since they have such a long incubation period, when they come out of their eggs, they're actually fully equipped with wings and feathers and everything like that. And when they get to the surface, they'll take a day or so to kind of get their bearings, and they will teach themselves how to fly somehow. And they will just know how to forage for food and everything else like that. It's perfectly equipped with all of the knowledge, just already, packaged there in its DNA, to know all of these things, to never be taught, never have any help at all. And interestingly, when it grows up, it will go and it will do the exact same thing with its young. It's never been taught even how to do this. It's never been shown by its parents how to build these nests and keep them at the right temperature. It receives zero knowledge passed down from any type of instruction or learning from any other megapodes. It just knows how. This incredible bird poses some really difficult challenges for evolution and provides a solid evidence for the existence of God. Why would the megapodes choose burial at all as their means of survival? How would they know that the eggs are going to survive? Why choose that method at all? And how did the megapode even know that it needed to keep the eggs in a particular temperature range parameter underground? And how would it develop the ability to be able to check the temperature and the humidity levels, to develop its own thermometer, if you will? How would it be able to do that over a long period of time? And then how would it know the procedure to keep it warmer or cooler or up the humidity levels? How would it develop or evolve the largest egg yolk of all birds just slowly over time? And then how would the baby megapodes, again, develop these feet slowly to be able to break out of their shell and to dig out? And how would they know how to use their feet? How would they slowly, evolve the knowledge of which direction to dig and the fact that they are underground? Being placed in a life and death situation underground, how did they know, how could they slowly evolve the size, strength, the stamina, the pre-digging nutrition, and the know-how to escape from this? It really is mind-boggling when we think about all of these questions. See, all it takes is for one generation to goof this up. And we don't have Australian incubator birds. We don't have these megapodes. All it takes is for one generation of buried megapodes to be buried and not know how to get out. And that's it. Or to not have the proper size egg yolk. Or to not have the know-how of flight and foraging and all of the other things that we've taken a look at. All it takes is for one, and they have gone extinct. Without a specific set of instructions already built into their DNA, these things don't exist. See, survival of the fittest doesn't make sense in a situation in which survival is impossible without these already being in place. What we see here is a bird that has all of the knowledge, all of the information, all of the abilities already fully functioning, pre-built. Well, there's no evidence of a slowly built over time with the Megapode. Well, how would that get there? See, DNA, the knowledge that's contained in DNA had to come from somewhere. Not by trial and error over time, not by accident, not by chaos, but by intelligence, by design, by God. In the book of Job, Job has a fascinating conversation with God, in which Job has been going through a lot of suffering. And God begins to tell Job that there are plans and there is knowledge that's just beyond him. And he begins asking Job some questions that, of course, he just cannot answer. And what I find interesting is that several of them are centering in on birds, and that God points to birds as being these creatures that provide questions and knowledge that only God could really know and understand fully. He says in Job 38 in verse 41, "Who prepares the raven its nourishment? When its young cry out to God and wander about without food." And of course the answer is that God is the one that takes care of all of these things. When we continue on in chapter 39, starting in verse 13, "The ostrich's wings flap joyously with the pinion and plumage of love, for she abandons her eggs to the earth. She warms them in the dust, and she forgets that a foot may crush them, or a wild beast may trample them. She treats her young cruelly, as if they were not hers. Though her labor be in vain, she is unconcerned, because God has made her forget wisdom, and has not given her a share of understanding." I find it interesting that here in this particular passage speaking about the ostrich, but it seems to apply to the Megapode, that they're just unconcerned, that God has caused them to forget wisdom, to forget that it is not rational, it is not reasonable, it's a death sentence to bury young underneath the earth. And yet, God took care of that anyway, providing them with the means to escape and to come out. And of course, today we have the Australian incubator bird. What an incredibly designed animal that just blows my mind. A couple of years ago, my family made a trip to an aquarium. And as they do with many aquariums, they had all types of live demonstrations and things like that. But there was one particular demonstration in which they did not tell anybody what the animal was. And so, our imaginations ran wild with what type of animal could it be? Could it be a falcon or an eagle, or could it be, who knows? Who knows what it was? And so they kind of had this crate up on the stage, and everybody was gathered, around in the seats in front of it, and just waiting to see the animal, and it was an opossum. And in my mind, I was like, wow, what a letdown. An opossum? Are you kidding me? But then she began to describe all of the features and the abilities of the opossum, and it blew my mind. First things first, the name is Opossum. It's not possum. The name possum is actually inaccurate. There are no possums. They are opossums. And so that was one of the questions that I had even asked the lady is about their technical name. And I guess it was just easier just to say, that possum over there. But the actual name is opossum. Well, here's why the opossum really is an amazing creature. First of all, they're like living garbage disposals. Anyone who's been around opossums know this is the truth. I mean, they're digging in trash, they're eating all kinds of stuff like that. They are considered disgusting, and for really good reason. I mean, they are the ones that are eating the flattened roadkill that's disgusting and rotting on the side of the road. They eat all kinds of trash and junk and nastiness. And I mean, really, they'll eat just about anything, which is why they're considered so nasty. And while this makes them gross, it actually makes them really valuable for cleaning up our environment and some of the nastiness that is around here, because they are like living garbage disposals for for nature, for our systems, and even, again, some of our own trash and things like that. But not only are they kind of like garbage disposals, but they are very resistant to disease. Now, they kind of would have to be. If they're eating trash and junk and dead animals rotting on the side of the road, you've got to be resistant to diseases. I mean, for example, how did that animal die? Did it die from some sort of disease or something like that? Well, again, the opossum is really resistant to disease. For example, opossums will eat and remove up to 96% of the ticks that land on them. And they're very resilient, if not almost nearly immune to Lyme disease, which is very, very nasty. And yet it's no problem for the opossum. They also are exceptionally resistant to rabies, which is important since they're eating, again, trash and bugs and all kinds of dead animals and things like that. So if there's an animal that had died from rabies and the opossum comes to clean it up and eats it, he doesn't have to worry about rabies because he's nearly immune to that. So it's very helpful that they are immune to these and they're not spreading these diseases. They're really eliminating them in their own bodies. But perhaps the most amazing feature of all, and this is the one that really caught my attention in this presentation, was that they are nearly immune to all snake venom. Now, let your mind process that for a minute. They are nearly immune to all venom from all snakes. Okay, so they can handle, like here in Colorado, we have the western diamondback rattlesnake. If an opossum is subjected to western diamondback rattlesnake venom, no problem. Well, even if you were to take the opossums here in America and subject them to, for example, India's Russell viper venom, it neutralizes the venom. Matter of fact, they have found that it is able to neutralize virtually all snake venom on the planet. The only one that we've seen that it cannot handle so far, it's not immune to, is the venom from the coral snake. And so somehow it is able to, again, just neutralize all of these venoms just naturally in its body, even though it has not even ever had experience with these snakes. It's not developing an immunity based on experience. It just is immune. That's really amazing. As you might imagine, because of how resistant it is to disease and to venom, it is leading the way in a lot of really important medical studies. They are looking to mass produce a peptide that they're finding in the opossum to create an almost universal antitoxin. So if you imagine, snakes in Africa and snakes in Australia and all kinds of different places to where antivenom is so difficult to produce and to be able to have available for everybody, if they're able to take the opossum and to generate it into an antivenom, that could be almost a universal antivenom for any type of snake venom. Very, very interesting. They also are playing a critical role in the advancement of the battle against Lyme disease, which again has impacted a lot of people. It's a very, very nasty disease. And so they're taking a look at that. But not only that, opossums are also leading the way in medical research for skin cancer, heart disease, HIV, and this one was interesting, even severe spinal cord injuries. They have been able to sever the spinal cord of a baby opossum, and the opossum is able to fully grow and bring that neural network back into fully functioning. And so how is it able to be so resistant to damage like that? The opossum is an amazing animal, and it is maybe more amazing than you thought. And so when you see that opossum digging through your trash or eating some roadkill or something like that, and just kind of sneer at it and turn your nose up at it, you might stop for just a second, pause for just a second, and realize just how amazing this little creature is that God has created. Job makes this statement that was so very wise. It says in Job 12, starting in verse 7, "But now ask the beasts, and let them teach you, and the birds of the heavens, and let them tell you. Or speak to the earth, and let it teach you, and let the fish of the sea declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In whose hand is the life of every living thing, and the breath of all mankind?" The knowledge and information that we find about God can be seen in creation. We can see that God is responsible for the opossum, for the megapode, for all of the creatures around. And if we will but listen, we will see that God's hand has been on every part of this life. But not just the life that's surrounding us, but ourselves as well. That God is responsible for even making you and me. This week, let's give Him the glory that He deserves. Thank you for joining us once again for another episode, another class of God's creatures that just blow my mind.